It was a marvelous summer day. The sun was already high above the mountains. The water reflected 1,000 sun bunnies and shimmered. At that time, a girl was sinking to the bottom of the pond. She was wearing a blue dress. She had long blonde hair. She slowly sank down without even trying to get out or swim up. There was only one thought in her mind: how she got here, why she was now descending to the bottom of the pond. The girl remembered. She had tried to help Jess, who had fallen into the lake first. The girl drew her hands to the watery abyss. Would she really die like that? What about Jess then? What would happen to her? And that could not be allowed to happen. The girl looked out with her blue eyes into the abyss. It was important to her to know that Jess was safe. Suddenly, she heard someone calling her name. This girl's name was Iris. Suddenly, she came to her senses and saw her with herself, the excited face of a girl with purple hair and eyes. She answered her name loudly. Her eyes were troubled. The girl quickly stood up and started coughing. The water got into her lungs, but the girl managed thanks to a strong. Everyone around her asked if Iris was all right. The girl didn't answer anything. She was slowly coming to her senses. At that moment, her sister rushed into the girl's arms. She was very happy that her sister was alive and well. The sister apologized to Iris. It was because of her that the girl could die. Iris hugged her sister back. She said she was fine. She was fine. The danger is over. It was a small blessing that both sisters were alive and well. Next to the girls sat their teacher. She was holding a first aid kit. The prisoner said she seemed to be doing fine. The only thing she needs now is some rest. This place is a shrine to the goddess, the temple of Hylis. It would be more accurate to say that it is a Hales orphanage created with the support of the temple. The sisters were sitting near the shore of the lake. Their teachers were sitting next to them. They could not get over what had happened. The teacher said that Iris was certainly good for daring to help her friend who had fallen into the water. But the teacher asked the girl not to forget and think of herself. The girl said okay and thanked for the help. The girl's name was Iris, and she lived in this orphanage. She has golden hair and blue eyes, just like a goddess. However, she is just an ordinary 13-year-old girl who likes to play with her friends. Or rather, it had been before she jumped into the water to save Jez. Wasn't really her sister, just a very close friend. And Iris thought of her as her sister. On the brink of death, her memories suddenly came back to her. In fact, this world is just the plot of a book she read in a previous life. On top of that, this book was in the tragic crime thriller genre. I mean, seriously, why here? In this novel, all the characters died at the hands of the protagonist, and even Iris herself died at his hands. And the main character in this novel, who also acts as the antagonist, is... And the girl thought for a moment. A boy with black hair, which is known to symbolize the devil. Not only did the boy have dark hair, he also had eyes as red as blood. In the novel, Theo was said to have brutally murdered everyone in the orphanage before he even reached adulthood. It was revenge for everyone constantly mocking him, calling him the devil. The boy was very patient. But there's a limit to everything. Iris didn't think it was fair. She had lived her whole life without knowing anything about Theo, but she would have to share the same fate as the others just because she was from the same orphanage. Is there no way to survive in this world? The events took place at the Haley's orphanage. Iris was sitting on a chair in the library. She was reading an interesting book. Her eyes were very surprised. This book was about amazing animals. The girl was approached by her mate. She was very surprised to see what Iris was reading. They were books. My child has changed, amazing animals. There are no bad children in the world. The friend wondered why she was suddenly reading such books. Iris's friend's name was Evelyn. The girl smiled. Didn't Evelyn wonder about that too? To me, not about a person in childhood have a great influence on them in the future. No matter how cruel a person grows up to be, he probably behaved exactly the same as all children when he was a child. Said she understood. I asked why the girl was combining books about people with books about animals. Iris said, all because any knowledge is useful. Besides, you should always be ready. Evelyn didn't quite know what she was talking about, but the girl decided not to be distracted, and Alan asked her to tell her when Iris stopped reading. The girl said she would be sure to warn her friend. The girl thought they always acted consistently. Consistently? Nothing just happens for nothing. The girl began to ponder. Theo's first murder was linked to the orphanage. There must be a reason for everything. It's just a matter of figuring out what it is. Apparently, the constant bullying that young Theo was subjected to hurt him deeply, and most likely because of that, he stopped trusting people completely. Iris quickly slammed the book shut. In any case, if she didn't try and fix it now, there wouldn't be another chance. The girl decided it was time to start a project to fix it from possession, and she clenched her fist hard. She took the book under her arm. She would need it later. Theo's boy was very hard to find. They live in the same house, but the girl never met him during the whole day. Maybe he's deliberately hiding from everyone. The girl walked through the deserted corridors of the orphanage looking for this boy. Suddenly, she stopped. Stop. Could he really be hiding? And if he was hiding, she should look for him in some dark and secluded places. She had to figure out where that place was. With the shelter was an old abandoned house. Iris thought that maybe it was there, so the girl went to look inside the structure. When she entered the old house, she saw a boy sitting in the corner under the wall. Iris was glad she had finally found him. The girl said hello to the young man. She said her name was Iris. She raised her hand cheerfully, but the boy sat back and didn't even look in her direction. With his hands around his knees, Theo was very angry. He asked her to leave quickly before he killed her. His eyes were kind of bloodshot. The boy didn't seem friendly at all, and at that moment the girl made a quick U-turn. She said all nice and clear. Iris was about to leave but remembered that she was going to talk to him. The girl stopped. After a moment's thought, she stormed out of the house. After all, the boy out of the blue said that he wanted to kill her. The girl became very scared, and she decided to wear his legs as soon as possible. Running up further, she stopped. A sigh of relief. She decided she needed to distract him somehow. The girl returned to the same house the next day holding a ball. She stood in front of the open door and kicked the ball hard into the house. The girl wanted it to look like an accident. After that, she ran into the house and started looking for her ball. She didn't know where it had rolled off to. As the girl walked on, she saw that the ball was lying right at Theo's feet. The boy sat unperturbed. He didn't even move. Iris sat down beside the boy on her knee, told him joyfully that here they met again. The girl took the ball in her hands and smiled cheerfully. She said the boy's name was most likely Theo, and she introduced herself once more. Her name was Iris. The girl smiled cheerfully and held her ball to her chest. The girl offered the boy to play ball with her. Theo's gaze was surprised today. He didn't understand why the girl came to him again. After all, he didn't want to be friends with anyone. He was hiding from everyone. And then a miracle happened. The boy stretched his arms towards the ball. He really wanted to play. It was a great achievement. The girl was surprised. But that's when Theo got the ball in his hands. He squeezed it so hard that the ball burst, and in the boy's hands there was a deflated ball. Iris was surprised. As she had expected, it would not be easy. The boy was very scary. At this time, the boy leaned on his knees and stood up. He told the girl that he was not a pet to come and stare at every day. He asked if Iris understood him. The boy then asked or she wanted him to disembowel her. The girl was surprised. She began to intermittently inaudible to answer. A cold cat appeared on her face. Suddenly the young man heard someone say, "You just look, so that's where the little devil was hiding." Iris was surprised. She didn't understand what it was that he was so suddenly. The boy quickly grabbed the girl under her arm. At that moment, 4 guys showed up at the door. They said that he had even chosen a suitable place to live. It was not surprising to them, for they all thought he was the devil. The girl was hiding behind the door at that moment. The boys said they had a hard time finding him. Theo was angry. He asked the guys to leave, or he'd rip those soaps off their faces. All indications were that the boy was furious. The redhead left. Apparently he wasn't going anywhere. Did the body think they would be frightened by his empty threats? And the boy had insulted Theo. At this moment, Iris was sitting round the corner listening intently to what Theo was saying. The boys were arguing. They told Theo that people like him should be eliminated at birth. Words like that hurt his body. It also hurt that even his parents had abandoned him. They insulted Theo. Iris didn't understand. Why are they acting like this? Why did they insult him so easily? After all, he hadn't done anything wrong to them. And the girl's eyes widened. It was all right. Theo hadn't done anything yet. He's just a little kid and she selfishly calls him a villain. Iris acted like everyone else. She was just afraid of him. She didn't even try to understand what was in the boy's heart. Why he was like that. There must be some explanation for it. Iris had thought he was a monster all along. The girl began to rethink everything she thought, what she said and what she felt. After all, she was no different at all from the others, who were standing there right now directly insulting him. And the girl wants to change him, so something has to change. The bullying of the boy, his constant reproaches and insults. And there are reasons for his detachment and anger towards the rest of the people. He closes himself off and doesn't want to believe them. They're just bad to him. And he's angry at the world. So first Iris should change not Theo but herself. These thoughts crossed the girl's mind as she sat outside the door. Now she has changed her goal from trying to survive to confronting her current Theo. At this time, the girl quickly jumped out of her hiding place. She gave a quick shout to William. She was fearless and not afraid of him at all. At that moment, she wanted to kind of protect and support then. She wanted to prevent him from offending her. Iris's appearance was full of determination. The look was fearless. William wondered, why is this girl protecting this beast? The girl called the boys cowardly brats. She said that in front of others, they couldn't even say a word. But when it came to Theo, they remembered all the insults. The boys stood confused. They didn't know what to say. William asked the girl why she was acting like this now. Does she really know who Theo is? And the boy pointed his finger menacingly in Theo's direction. Iris quickly grabbed the boy's finger. She asked what was wrong with him. Iris asked what William was talking about. She knew all about it. He was her best friend. Hearing Theo say that, well, William went on. He asked why an angel like Iris was friends with that brat. The girl didn't understand what he meant by why. Even angels are lenient with humans, and Iris clenched two fists in front of her. She said if they ever pointed a finger at Theo again and made fun of him, she wouldn't just let it go. William said that Iris was kind of weird. It's probably because of that devil. And the guys asked Theo to just wait. Iris just laughed at that. She told them to run while they could, and to get as far away from them as they could. The girl was resolute in her words. After that, she turned to Theo. She asked him to forgive her. The boy stood silent and thought. Iris asked her to forgive her for never trying to get to know him, also for being afraid of him. Theo turned away from Iris. The girl said that she really wanted to be friends with him, and smiling, she held out her hand to him. Theo looked at Iris questioningly. Then he turned his gaze to her outstretched hand. The boy said she was doing the right thing, that she was afraid of him. After that, he asked her to roll away from here. Iris was surprised and shocked. The boy was on his way out, and if she didn't listen to him, he might tear out all her hair. The girl wondered, would it really go on like this? Wasn't that the perfect moment? She didn't expect him to do that. According to the logic of all the stories, this is when they should have become friends. But they didn't. The boy just turned his back and left the house. Iris clenched her hands hard into fists. This gesture showed that she was strong and she wasn't going to give up. She would fight to the end. The events took place in an abandoned house. The girl was again in the abandoned house next to Theo. This day she brought a book with her, and cheerfully commented on it. Just as she thought, Joseph and Philip are best friends, and the girl fluttered round the room spinning. She said it made her soul happy, while you sat on his chair and watched her intently. When Iris turned to him, he looked away, making it seem like he wasn't watching her at all. The girl apologized, the boy again asking her to get out of here as soon as possible. He threatened her again, but now Iris was happy about it. She laughed merrily, and didn't even think about doing as he said. It was already dusk, the sun was rolling to order. Iris sat and looked at the macaron she was holding in her hand. This macaroni was very tasty. She walked over to Theo and said, it would be really nice if she could share it with someone. Maybe there was someone in this room who wanted to share it with her. She didn't call the boy directly by name, but the boy was angry, and again asked her to get out of his sight, and again hurled threats at her, what he might do if she did not leave now. But the girl only laughed merrily. After that, she turned her back and decided to leave. She said that if no one in this room wanted pasta, she would eat it herself. The girl walked away. Already the full moon was rolling out in the sky. Except at this point, Theo was ready to go outside. He would go outside when it was total darkness and no one was here. He felt light and free at that time. At that time, Iris stumbled and fell. She was probably watching Theo. The girl fell to the ground. She was very worried about her knees. It would be great if someone would help her. But Theo only looked at her calmly. He wasn't ready to help her. He just nudged her with his foot and stepped over and walked away. But she seems to be making progress, because this time he just stepped over her and he didn't say a word. At least he wasn't throwing rude words around now. He just kept quiet. And now it was dawn. It was getting light and warm outside. The girl went out on the porch of the house. There was one question on her mind: how Theo had found this place. After all, this place was just made for hiding. The girl stood and pondered aloud. At that moment, a boy came up to her. He said that was why he was here. After all, he needed to hide. Iris didn't expect him to talk to her. She looked rapturously into his eyes and said his name. The boy stood watching Iris carefully. He was no longer so angry and fierce. The girl reassured herself. If she got too emotional, he would never answer her again. Iris said it was a cool place. This place is straight up perfect for hiding, and she called him an expert. These words must have upset the boy. He looked angry again. It looked like she'd ruined everything. The boy walked over to Iris and squeezed. He said that those who didn't need to hide didn't need to look in here. He was referring specifically to the girl. His eyes were bloodshot. His pupils became like a cat's. Iris looked carefully into his eyes. She asked if he thought it was a little absurd. The boy smiled. He asked if she really thought so. Iris said that it was just the standards people set for themselves. No one can be sure of others, because only the man himself can decide his own fate. Said she didn't trust other people's standards. Theo and looked at the girl carefully, and she kept talking. That's why she didn't listen to what others said, because it was more important what one thought of oneself. She smiled cheerfully and held out her hands to Theo. In the empire of Latras, where she was born, the power of the church is not inferior to that of the emperor. For the myth of the founding of the empire was also the story of the goddess, with your peace, and the demon destroyed by her hand. And since almost everyone in the empire believes in this story, so there has been a lot of superstition about how to identify the demon. One such superstition stated that a demon has black hair and red eyes. Because of this, poor Theo, born with these distinctive features, has to endure constant bullying and persecution by humans. As a result, the boy has lost track of who he is. Even if everyone else tells him he's a demon, don't believe them. You should always have an opinion. Theo wondered how she could be so sure of that. He thought about her words for a moment. How does she know those standards are wrong? At that time, some sound came from the street, turned around and asked what that sound was. From the street came the cry to beat. Hammers pounded against the walls. Somebody was telling me to hit harder. It was again the guys who came earlier and insulted Theo. Iris quickly jumped outside. She saw the boy William again. She asked what they were doing, and what they would do if the building collapsed from those blows. What would be destroyed, along with whoever's hiding in it. The girl looked in horror at the flying boards. The boys were just smashing everything around them with hammers. This time it was really bad. They didn't know what to do. That's when Theo jumped out of the door. He said it was dangerous to stay here any longer. He wrapped his arms around her. He sort of knocked her down. Right at the moment, the building collapsed. The girl didn't expect him to do that, and they fell to the ground. Not far from the ruined house stood guys with hammers. They were very happy with the work they had done. Iris was lying on top of Theo, and on top of Theo lay the boards from the collapsed house. The girl asked if the 100 were all right. The boy had a lot of abrasions on him, but he replied that he was fine. Iris saw the boy's face was badly wounded. She wondered how much it hurt, and she slowly ran her hand over his face. Theo said his wound didn't hurt one bit. At that time, shelter workers ran up to them. I could see the director of the orphanage running over here. She was asking what the hell it was. The woman asked sternly what had happened here. Iris was shocked. It was the headmistress of her orphanage. She quickly closed her eyes. She supposed she was about to get hit. Theo wanted to touch her shoulder, but at that time he abruptly withdrew his hand without even touching. He quickly pulled his hand away. It was very hard for him to do that. He only howled for Iris to calm down and not cry. Iris was in the principal's office. She told the headmistress it wasn't fair. But the headmistress was of a different opinion. She didn't want to consider Iris's opinion. She didn't want to deal with the situation. Everyone stood in the principal's office. Iris, Theo, William, and his friends. They all stood in a line with their hands up. Punishment awaited them all. The girl tried to explain that it was all William and his friends' fault. Why she and Theo would be punished too. But the headmistress stood her ground. She knew that Iris and Theo had broken into that locked house. That was the reason they were being punished. They would also be punished for fighting with their friends. The headmistress simply let any mention of bullying at the orphanage pass her ears. Iris screamed that it wasn't fair. After all, it was William who was the one who first started messing around with Theo. Theo stood silent. He only occasionally cast his glance at the girl. And when Iris turned her attention to Theo, he immediately looked away. The girl looked at Theo. She felt sorry for him. At this point, the headmistress asked for her hands to be lowered. The headmistress bent down to the girl and called her name. One thing she didn't understand was that the girl had always got along with her friends. What happened now? Why she fought with them, and why she blamed them. The girl said she just did what she thought was right. The headmistress put her hand on Iris's shoulder. She bent over to the girl and asked, maybe she just liked Theo. If not, why would she even want to hang out with a boy like that? Iris is an outstanding child, but even she can't get along with him. The girl got angry. She didn't want the headmistress to go on any further. What if you hear him? She said. The headmistress. This was said so loudly that even a deaf man would have heard it. Theo stood with his eyes down to the floor. He heard perfectly well what headmistress Iris had said. While the girl was busy talking to the headmistress, Theo broke free and ran away. Iris shouted his name. She wanted to stop him. Theo had already reached the door and stopped for a second. He heard Iris calling his name. The girl shouted wait and rushed straight to him. She wanted to run away with him, but the headmistress grabbed her shoulder firmly. The headmistress asked Iris to forget about that rude boy. Iris was surprised. She shouldn't behave like that. The girl's face was red. Tears were visible in her eyes. She wasn't ashamed of herself now, but of the directory there. She asked a woman if she wasn't supposed to be an adult. She's acting like a little kid. Iris called the group of guys who attacked her and Theo idiots. But they're just kids. And the headmistress is already an adult behaving the same way. Tears came to the girl's eyes. Hearing the offense his side, William and his friends were angry. Iris didn't calm down. She asked the headmistress how she could behave like this as an adult. I wasn't quite sure what the girl was talking about. She had a stern look in her eyes. Iris headed for the door. She said that for the headmistress's information, Theo had saved her life today, and she slammed the door behind her loudly. The events took place in the medical office. A teacher was sitting at the desk. At that moment, Iris peeked through the door of the infirmary. She turned to Haley's teacher. The girl asked if she could come in. Haley's teacher turned around. She asked the girl why she had come this time. Had someone fallen into the lake again? And the teacher got up from the table. At that moment, Haley's teacher saw blood on her hands. But the girl quickly said she was fine and the blood on her hands was not hers. She asked the teacher or give her a first aid kit. She needs the first aid kit for a friend. Iris asked for peroxide and bandages. Haley's teacher asked what the hell happened and where her friend was. The teacher offered to do it herself. Iris shouted the word no loudly. She realized what she had done wrong and quickly covered her mouth with her hands. The girl apologized to Haley's teacher. The teacher looked at the girl in silence. Iris said she couldn't bring her friend to her yet, but it would be very nice to give her the cure. She trusted Haley's teacher, of course, but Theo, who had just been hurt by an adult, would be an outsider. The teacher silently exhaled. She quickly went to the first aid kit and put everything she needed in it. Haley's teacher said that the wounds could be much more serious than she thought, so she asked her friend to be sure to take her to her after the first aid. Iris was happy. She didn't expect Haley's teacher to give her the first aid kit so quickly. The girl quickly thanked the teacher, and suddenly the girl wanted to say something else. She asked Haley's teacher, where would she go if she wanted to hide away from everyone and be alone? Haley's teacher thought for a moment. If she wanted to hide, she would probably go to the cave in the hill behind the shelter. Iris was surprised. Is there really a cave near the shelter? Haley's teacher said that she rarely met people in that forest, so if she wanted to be alone, she would definitely go there. And the girl quickly set off on her journey. Paryu turned round to the teacher once more. She thanked her once more. It was already midnight outside. The moon was full in the sky and the stars were twinkling. The girl walked through the dark forest and carried a first aid kit in front of her. And as in the cave, the girl thought, him. It must be very painful now, especially after what the headmistress said. The woman shouldn't have done that. She's no better than those teenagers. Iris didn't understand why people are so eager to offend Theo. Suddenly she saw something on earth. Her eyes widened in surprise. On earth, blood was visible at the entrance to the cave. The girl was scared, but thinking about how much Theo was hurting right now, she had to keep going. Here she was already approaching the cave. She was sure that's where you were. And then her eyes widened. Trails of blood led onwards, and ahead a boy was sitting on the ground. Iris was happy that she had finally found him, and she shouted his name loudly. The boy heard a noise. He directed his gaze there. He was a veteran, and there were tears in his eyes. Iris noticed his eyes. Had he been crying alone all this time? The girls felt pain for their friend. She approached him slowly. As she approached the boy, she took a seat. The medical case the girl placed in front of her. She asked Theo if he remembered when he asked why she was so sure the standards were wrong. The girl opened her medical case and took out a bandage. That she didn't really think they were infidel. She just believed in him. The girl wet it and put it on Theo's wound. The boy asked if she believed in him. The girl laughed merrily. It was like she was radiating light. Iris confirmed that she had faith in him. Theo looked at her with eyes wide open. No one had ever said that to him before, and he was surprised. It was night, and Iris was sitting next to Theo in the cave. They weren't scared at all. They were together. Iris said, the devil would never save another person. They deprived Hood and don't care about the others. At this time, the boy sat listening intently to what the girl was saying. Theo said if she stayed with him, she'd feel bad too, just like that abandoned house. He told her that she would be cursed too. These words surprised the girl very much. After a little thought, she mouthed his name again. She asked only to tell him honestly, is he really a demon or not? The boy turned his face away and thought. She asked again if he was a demon or not. All of a sudden, he just shouted, no, he's not a demon. At that moment, Iris hugged Theo. She said she knew everything and she believed him. The girl hugged the boy. She promised him, even if everyone in the world called him a demon, she would always be at his side. The girl asked again to show her his wound. She quickly taped a bandage soaked in peroxide to his cheek. Theo only groaned a little. Another moment and the job was done. All the wounds had been treated. Iris quickly wiped the sweat from her forehead and smiled. You had him sitting there all bandaged up. He had taped wounds on his face and his head was bandaged. Suddenly the girl said there was something else left. Theo was surprised. Was there really something else left? Iris took Theo's head in her hands. Iris took Theo's head in her hands and looked carefully into his eyes. Then she closed her eyes and brought her lips close to his face and kissed him. Theo looked at the girl in surprise. He quickly pulled away from her. The boy asked what she was doing. Iris put a finger up. She told him what he would see, and she said that was definitely it now. Suddenly, a glow appeared around the boy. He himself did not realize what was happening. The whole cave seemed to be illuminated by this light. The boy was warm and cozy. He said he was fine, and it seemed to him that his wounds were healed. Iris laughed. It's all the work of the Ho effect. She asked Theo if he liked it. The boy smiled. He said he liked it. Iris would quickly get off her knees. She said it was time for them to go back. After all, it was getting very late. She had yet to show it to Miss Haley, and the girl held out her open hand to the boy. He looked fearfully at her hand. Then he looked directly into her eyes. Then he looked at her hand again. After a little thought, he took Iris's hand and thanked her. Iris looked surprised at Theo. The boy noticed the look at once. He asked why she was looking at him so strangely. The girl answered all because she was happy, and the girl smiled. Theo looked at her and remained silent. He didn't know what she was talking about. Iris was just surprised to hear him say thank you, which meant they were friends now. Their feet stood close together. At that moment, Theo turned away. What made her think that? The girl was flustered. Did she mean to say that they were not friends? So even after everything that has happened, he doesn't consider her his friend. Iris asked how she could be friends with him then, and she grabbed his arm. Theo said, "I don't know," told her to back off. But the girl said no. She would not leave him until he said so. She was very determined. He dismissed the girl with his hand. He turned away from her and said how would he know that? After that, he suddenly withdrew his hand. Theo started to run away, shouting at him to wait for her. She told him to come this way. And by now, you and Iris were in the nurse's station. Haley's teacher said it was very strange. Iris asked if something was wrong, but it was rather the opposite. Miss Haley scrutinized Theo's wounds. She was surprised that the boy had deep wounds, but somehow it was as if they had already healed. Iris was surprised. How could wounds heal so quickly? After all, the events had only happened yesterday. Haley said, "Apparently Theo has good innate regeneration, so there's no need to worry." The boy sat silently and listened, but he didn't really like being different. Iris took the boy by the shoulder. "It's all thanks to her. The girl asked me to thank her." You were surprised. He wasn't going to thank her. Iris was shocked. Was he really going to continue to ignore her like this? Miss Haley laughed. They were getting along well. It was already dawn outside. The children were outraged. Why would Iris socialize with someone like him? He's the devil everyone's been talking about. Some people thought he was ugly, but almost all the children were dismissive of him. And Iris acted calm and Theo followed her. They walked over to one of the tables and pulled back a chair. Iris sat down next to Theo. The girl wished Theo a good meal, and the boy asked if they had to eat when there were only people here. Asked me to forget about them. After all, they actually have the right to eat on time too. Theo said she shouldn't be here either. Iris didn't understand why he said that. The boy pounded his fists on the table. She didn't understand him. They don't care who eats next to him. It's who he is that matters to them. Iris laughed merrily. She asked him if they were friends, and the girl looked into Theo's eyes. It was just the two of them at the table. None of the children had the courage to sit next to them. Theo said that he and she weren't friends. Iris said that one day they would be, and Theo said that would never happen. He called Iris weird, and the girl didn't understand why he called her that. That she got really weird. Iris was surprised. Had he noticed that her personality had changed? Theo tried to explain to her. After all, she had been talking to him more lately. At that moment, Iris poked a sausage on her fork. She held it out to Theo and asked him to try it. She said it was delicious. The girl and the boy were having a lot of fun chatting. She asked him what food he liked from the tray. She asked him if he wanted to play ball after lunch, and you told him he'd go for more first. Iris exhaled a sigh of relief. She had been too careless. She'd have to be careful that he didn't notice anything. At that moment, someone ran into the canteen. The boy asked someone to call the teacher. After all, something was happening outside. Iris looked at the boy in surprise. She immediately suspected that something had happened to Theo. There were a lot of kids crowded into the courtyard. They all looked at what was happening. Theo and some boy were standing in the courtyard. Theo grabbed the young man by the pecs and shook him. He asked the boy if he wanted to die. Theo's eyes were red with rage. When you swung it round and wanted the young man to hit you with his fist, Iris ran out. She screamed no. The girl said no, and she rushed over to the body to help. She grabbed his arm and begged him not to do it, but the boy wouldn't calm down. The young man who was lying on the ground said he was sorry, and it was a big mistake he had made. Iris didn't know the details, but he said it was a mistake. The girl asked for a boy. Theo looked round suddenly. After thinking for a moment, he quickly let the young man go. The boy ran away with tears and screams, and Iris took his hand gently. Theo looked at the girl in surprise. She pulled his arm and motioned for him to follow her. They ran quickly down the lane. Theo looked at Iris carefully. The girl asked Theo what happened, why he suddenly grabbed this guy and wanted to hit him. You told him that this young man insulted Iris, and he couldn't stand it. Iris was surprised. Did he really do it for her? Iris told Theo that he repeated so much that they weren't friends, but still cared so much about her. Theo wondered why she was looking at him like that. Iris said thank you very much to Theo, and threw herself around his neck. She hugged him. It was very surprising. Iris said she understood and he did it for her, and she kissed the boy again. Theo quickly pushed Iris away from her. He asked me to carry this nonsense and get away from him. The girl yelped and flew off. Theo grimaced at the kiss. He said she also hugged him all the time. Iris was surprised. She had hugged him unknowingly after all. Suddenly Iris turned to Theo. She thanked him for trying to protect her, but asked him to stop being so mean to other kids. She didn't mean he was bad. She knew and understood. The girl asked him not to forget that she was always at his side. Theo asked if she really wanted him to be kinder. Iris said not really. He was already kind enough. She just wanted the other children to realize that too. She also didn't want him to get hurt over some misunderstanding. On quickly grabbed his arm. Surprised, he looked at her and said, well, out of surprise. Did he really agree with her? She started bouncing on the Vesta, for she was very happy about it. Theo was surprised that she was excited. Iris said that he himself would stop constantly thinking about the fact that he wasn't a human, but a demon. There was a look of surprise on the girl's face. It was the first time she'd seen Theo smile. I can't believe he's smiling right now. Well, his smile was more like the face of a man about to kill someone. And if she wanted him not to be called a demon anymore, something had to be done. On the edge of the forest near the shelter, the children were playing football. The game was lively and joyful. One of the boys shouted to pass to him. At this moment, Theo was sitting nearby watching the game. His eyes were strained. Iris asked him to relax his eyes. Theo interjected. Does he really need to relax his eyes? The girl laughed. With strained eyes, she looked even more like a serial killer. You decided to try it and concentrated. He tried and looked closely at the girl. His eyes were setting with a red light. Iris was against it. That wasn't what she meant at all. Theo was upset. Was it really that bad? Iris realized that she had overreacted. At this point, she took a closer look at Theo. Maybe it was his hair. His hair was already noticeably overgrown and disheveled. He really looked like a tramp. Iris walked over and scrutinized his hair. She asked if Theo trusted her. You said of course he did. She took his hand and asked him to follow her. I asked him where she was taking him, brought him into the room and sat him in a chair. Around his neck, she tied a cloth around his neck. Theo didn't realize what she was doing. Iris said she was going to give him a haircut. If she trims his strands, he'll be cuter. He'll also be more comfortable and his hair won't get in his eyes. Theo asked, had she ever cut anyone's hair at all? Or was he the first person she'd ever decided to cut her hair? Iris didn't answer anything. At that moment, bounced up from his chair and said he had changed his mind. Iris didn't understand why. After all, he had said he believed her. And the girl quickly grabbed him by the collar. The chair flew the other way. And Iris grabbed Theo and laid him on the floor. She asked him to trust this time after all. Who knows, maybe she's a reborn hairdresser. Theo was lying on the floor, cold sweat appearing on his face. He said it could be dangerous. Iris knew that. She wasn't sure she could do it right. But it didn't matter because it would still be better than it was now. Theo gave up and sat down in a chair. Iris was happy. And then the first strand fell to the floor. The girl tried hard. She wanted Theo to like her new hairstyle. The girl cut his hair for a long time and it was ready. The boy didn't look at himself in the mirror. After everything was ready, he looked up and was surprised. The hairstyle was really beautiful. Iris was surprised because his face is a danger to all the ladies. Theo asked if he was really that strange looking, but it wasn't. Iris looked because that he looked just fine. And the girl asked him to admire it in the mirror if he didn't believe her. Iris quickly handed the mirror to Theo. The boy was delighted with his appearance. He didn't expect his hair to look so good. It looked good on him. Iris thought maybe she had a talent. Theo continued to gaze into his reflection. The girl asked him if he didn't like it. The boy liked everything. Now he can also see his eyes. It was exactly. And the address looked into Theo's eyes. Theo was called a demon because of his red eyes, and he might not like seeing them now. No matter how much the girl praises his hair or his eyes, Theo might think she's cheating him. At that minute, the girl put her hand on his arm and put the mirror away. And she really wanted to say something to him. Theo looked at Iris carefully with her red eyes. The girl said she really liked his hair. It was so dark, just like the night sky. And his red eyes are like rubies. And no matter who says it, she really likes it. She liked his looks a lot. Theo was surprised. Iris gazed into his bottomless eyes. She gently stroked his cheek. And at that moment, Theo smiled. Iris didn't expect it. Did he really smile? At that moment, Theo awed and assumed his usual look. Didn't he even realize he was smiling? Iris said he now has a nice haircut and a cute smile. All that's left is to make friends. She was all excited. But at that moment, the girl heard that he had no desire to make new friends. Aries was surprised. Theo looked upset. After all, she had done his hair and taught him how to smile, but he still didn't need anyone. But isn't that a bad thing? Having people who can always protect him. You told him he already had one. And he took Iris's hand. He said she was all he needed. And he didn't need anyone else. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. She was stunned. Suddenly, Theo covered his mouth with his palm. I wonder if he did it on purpose. Where did he learn to do that? Theo laughed. The laughter made tears show in his eyes. He said that she had such a funny reaction, but everything he said was not a joke. All those words he said sincerely. He really doesn't need anyone else. After all, he only cut his hair because she wanted him to. He does everything to make her happy. Iris was shocked. When did he learn to talk like that? Anyway, it was unexpected. And he said he didn't know how to be a friend. And she patted Theo on the head. Iris quickly grabbed Theo's hand. She said since she had already cut his hair, it was time to go. At that moment, Theo mumbled that they were friends now. Iris was surprised. Theo walked proudly past her, and she stood there, unable to say anything. Did he really think of her as his mate now? Iris noticed that Theo was embarrassed. The events took place outside the shelter building. Theo and Iris were sitting at the edge of the forest under a tree. The girl was sitting and drawing something on the earth with her wand. She had a few conditions for Theo. Firstly, not to say anything about the murder, even if he doesn't mean it, because many people and children may not understand him. For example, when he talks about puking his guts out, and the girl asked if he understood her. You don't have to gut people to understand their inner world. Theo asked what he would do if the man started calling him names or tricking him. If that happens, that person can just be punched. Iris laughed, for it was a joke. She wanted to say that people have many different ways to express their displeasure besides brute force. You made him wonder about these ways. Well, for example, and the girl wondered. Nothing came to her mind at the moment. Had she forgotten how to express anger without bad words? She'd never been that way, had she? Theo asked if maybe she was too small to teach him. Iris was hurt by that. The girl said it was necessary to continue. Secondly, no violence. You sat him up and looked at Iris in surprise. She didn't understand why he was looking at her like that. But the boy hadn't even said anything. I mean, she could see it in her eyes and read it. There was also a final condition, and Theo is ready. Thirdly, it is necessary to be nice. The boy doesn't get it, who he needed to be nice to. Iris said that it is necessary to be nice to everyone around him. After all, there are so many nice people around. Everyone gathered in the stadium near the shelter. No one knew why they had been asked to gather. Suddenly, someone announced attention. All the children looked in surprise in the direction of the sound. Iris walked towards the children and clapped her hands cheerfully. She asked if everyone was here. The children stood looking at her in surprise. The girl coughed loudly to attract attention. She said she had gathered them all here to introduce someone. For many children do not know him, since he mostly hides from everyone. It was not clear to the children who she was talking to. Iris said that she couldn't say that yet. She asked everyone to listen to her. She has a friend in their orphanage who suffers from pent-up rumors. Everyone was interrupting. They couldn't wait to find out who it was. The girl said that, to make a long story short, her friend is not in a very good position right now. Because of this, everyone is avoiding or insulting him, and this hurts her friend very much. The girl told everything emotionally and gestured with her hand. The girls felt sorry for her friend. They began to sympathize. Iris said he doesn't even play ball with the others. No, it was much worse than that. He doesn't play with anyone. He has no friends. His only friend is Iris. That was terrible. After saying that, the children thought about it. Iris asked everyone to try to be his friend, and the children cheered and applauded. Everyone wanted to be the boy's friend. The girl shoved her hands into her pockets. She breathed a sigh of relief. After all, she knew that she could count on the orphanage. As a token of her gratitude, she handed out a piece of chocolate to each of them. All the kids were surprised. If it was chocolate, you could even get a few more. The chocolate was very tasty, and the children thanked Iris, right in their mouths. Now the most important moment has arrived. Now that everyone is calm and happy, it's time to introduce him, although his name will probably scare some people. And the girl said Theo's name enthusiastically, and she pointed her hand in his direction. All the children were shocked. Had she really said, could this boy really be her friend? Theo stood behind a tree and looked out at the children. His gaze was a little wary. One of the children asked, "Does Iris want to scare them all with this demon?" The boy stood watching the children nonchalantly. At this time, he smiled happily and said, "Hello, everyone." The girls present were surprised, and he just said hello to them. He knows how to say hello. Iris asked her friend to call. His name is Theo, and he is their peer. All the children can see that he is a very kind and wonderful friend. One of the boys screamed, for he had black hair and red eyes. Iris said, "That's right. Yes, he does have that appearance, but it is necessary to look at him. Theo stood there and smiled. What's wrong with black hair, after all? It's just hair, not demons. But the boy did not calm down. He also asked for attention to his red eyes. Isn't that the main feature of a demon? The girl just laughed. She said it was just a coincidence. If it was, there was no proof that he wasn't a demon. Iris was upset. Did they really still have doubts? All right, now she needed to show them. She asked Theo if he was ready to show everyone. The boy was ready. At that moment, Iris took him by one arm. After that, she asked to give him her other hand. Theo complied. The girl thanked him and called him good boy. After that, she turned her attention to the children. She asked them if demons were so friendly. The boys stood stunned. Some of the children shouted out that Iris had tamed a demon. The girls' questions came pouring in. Everyone wondered how she did it. Some called her an angel. Theo had said earlier about it not working, but Iris only giggled merrily. From the day everyone saw her abilities, rumors quickly spread that she had tamed a demon. No girls came up and asked if she was sure it wasn't dangerous. Iris laughed and said that Theo wasn't dangerous at all. She tried to explain everything every time. A lot of people shouted that Iris was the best, but they just wouldn't listen to her. Her friend Evelyn understood now why the girl read those books. Only this friend understood her, and it was very interesting. Her friend demanded to know all about how she'd tamed Theo. And thanks to Evelyn, the main gossip girl at Haley's orphanage, word spread even faster. Iris apologized to Theo. It wasn't what she wanted at all. Theo said it was all right. They often sat by the river by the tree and talked. Iris realized that it wasn't all right. After all, you had made him angry with her. And his silence was frightening. Theo wasn't angry. Why should he be angry with her at all? She was his best friend and he didn't need anyone else. After all, he knew from the beginning that this plan would fail. Iris asked, Why hadn't he stopped her then? He didn't care what other people thought of him now. No matter what he said, Iris didn't listen to him. Theo often told her one friend was enough for him, but Iris looked pleadingly into his eyes. She wished he had more friends. Besides, the plan worked, though not the way she wanted it to. The girl didn't understand in what way. After all, no one else laughed at Theo or mocked him, and that was a big plus. Iris had exorcised a dangerous demon, so there was nothing more to fear. Theo's just a good pet now. Isn't that what happened? It was sad that the kids don't see him for who he really is. At that moment, Theo took Iris's hands in his own. He looked carefully into her eyes. It was enough for him that she no longer despised him, so he asked the girl not to be upset. Iris was in agreement. Just like that, her plan to restore Theo from the abuse ended with a little progress. And so it is New Year's Eve on the 1st of January. In the Empire of Latras, the 1st of January is a special day. According to legend, this world full of demons was saved thanks to the goddess on this very day. Since then, the 1st of January has been a day meant to give thanks to the goddess who gave them freedom. It is also the day when, according to legend, the goddess who will bring the world to an end will grant their wish. Theo and Iris stood by the painting and looked at it carefully. Each of them made a different wish. Traditionally, all people make a wish today, but the wish must not be told to anyone. After all, according to belief, it may not come true. Iris asked Theo if he had decided on his New Year's wish, but Theo hadn't thought of a wish yet. The girl hoped he would have time to think of something. She was worried that he had too many. The girl said that if he wanted to, she could make one of his wishes. The young man said once before Iris had said she didn't believe in demons, or her in the goddess story. The girl laughed. She just knew Theo wasn't a demon. She didn't deny their existence at all, because he already knows that. And the girl grabbed his hand. He looked closely into her eyes. Iris walked up to the painting, hands raised. She decided to ask the goddess to make her a rich man. And not just a rich man, but one who could run 100 orphanages. Theo inquired, what is she going to do with these orphanages? She wanted to get everyone to take care of kids like them so that those kids would then take care of the next ones. You told him she could do it with absolutely no money. Iris thought Theo was very naive. After all, there was no money in their world. Someday people would have to pay for breathing too. Theo was indignant. After all, they only need air to breathe. Iris was in agreement with him. She talked about how it would cost money in the future. Iris was surprised. She thought about the fact that in a few years they would be 16 and would have to leave the orphanage. That would happen very soon. Iris could read and write. She also had dexterous hands, so she could be a maid in a castle. Theo wondered about his abilities. Iris wondered what he was good at. Theo wondered if she was provoking him. But that's not what she meant. I was just being told about the way things would be in the future. After they leave the orphanage, they have to earn money. But Theo said that it would be 2 years before that would happen. But they only had 2 years. If they didn't think about the future now, they would be beggars, or they would enter the Temple of Halus and spend their whole lives there. Theo didn't see what was wrong with that. Working in the church means they can never go out into the world again. It is important just to think about it. Some people are born, grow, and die in the temple, never having seen anything. Iris asked if Theo wanted to see the world. Theo opened his mouth to seem something. Iris had already shouted out what she had decided. She suggested that Theo run away right now. The girl offered to run away from the orphanage without telling the teachers anything. Theo looked at the girl in surprise. What was she up to? And so at midnight, when it was snowing, Theo, along with Iris, left the shelter. Theo kept asking Iris. She's 100% sure they should do it. Even though they've come this far, is Theo still afraid? But Theo wasn't afraid. Iris asked him to stop grumbling and follow her. Theo understood. He walked on in silence. The girl took the boy's hand. They would have some danger on the way, then they would need to return at once. They walked holding hands along the snow-covered edge of the forest. The snow slowly covered their footprints. Suddenly you asked him to a girl. Do they have to hold hands? Iris said they had to because the nights were very dark, and if they didn't hold hands, they might get separated and lost. The girl wondered if he didn't like holding her hand. It was cold outside, and the children were without hats. It was good that the moon was shining brightly today, so they had the least chance of getting lost. Suddenly the girl exclaimed. She pointed towards the cave. It was the same cave where the body was hiding, and the girl offered to give me a break for a while. They went into the cave and sat down. Laid out a map on the ground. She began to look at it, looking for the right path. Theo was deep in thought the whole time. He asked why she wanted to go out into the world so badly. The boy decided that living in the temple wasn't so bad after all. Doesn't she have a different opinion? Iris was surprised. Why Theo was suddenly talking about this. She didn't understand it at all. The girl said she wanted to travel, not live like a bird in a cage. The girl asked the body if it wanted something else, but the boy was silent. Suddenly, Iris said, since they had already rested, they could continue on their way. She quickly rolled up the map and got to her feet. And the children continued on their way holding hands. Iris was so happy. It was like she was glowing. Suddenly the girl's over a bump. and she fell to the ground through the boy's arm. The girl sat down. Her leg was very sore. Theo asked if she was all right. Iris thought she had sprained her ankle. What are they going to do now? She won't be able to walk any further. Theo apologized. The boy decided that it was all his fault. He should have just held her hand tighter. The girl was sobbing. She wanted so much to show Theo the beautiful scenery. The boy tried to calm her down. Suddenly he turned away and went somewhere. The girl didn't understand what was wrong with him or what he wanted to do. He put his back to her and asked her to climb up, but the girl was against it. It could not be done. The boy was still very weak and she could not climb on his back. Theo didn't want to watch her cry, and the young man once again asked the girl to climb on his back. Iris asked him again if he was sure. Theo said yes. The girl shot up onto their backs and wrapped her arms around their necks. The boy was stronger than she thought. Theo asked her to show him where to go. He didn't know the way at all. He walked fast enough despite carrying a heavy burden. Suddenly the girl told him she had a question. She asked him if he wanted to return to the temple. Theo replied, "Not really." Iris realized he had answered like that on purpose so as not to upset her. He had lied to her, and she knew it was a lie. Iris asked why he had said those words then. Suddenly the boy stopped. Here they came. They were standing on a mountain. It was dawn. From the mountain they could see their village. There were many beautiful houses. The village was like a toy from here. It was an incredible sight. She said how cool it would be to live there. She was very interested to see what it was like there. Theo said maybe. At this point, Theo said that he didn't want to ever part with her. He continued to hold the girl on his back. Because if they leave the orphanage, they will have to live separately. They'll each have to do their own thing. And he really doesn't want to be separated from Iris. The girl wondered. So Theo didn't want to be friends with her because he was afraid of losing her in one moment. Suddenly the girl jumped off his back. It would probably sound cruel to Theo, but she didn't want to lie to him, therefore. Iris replied, "It may sound sad, but it's only natural." Theo was surprised. Is it really natural? What said that it was hard for people to be together every day? Only if they weren't family. But even so, they'll still be able to date as they are now. And the fact that they are friends will never change. They'll even be able to write each other letters. Theo looked thoughtfully into the distance. The girl asked what he was thinking about, but the boy did not answer and said that it was time for them to go. He picked the girl up on his back and they walked off into the distance. Iris thought for a moment. It seemed that Theo was shocked by the realization that one day they would have to break up. Because from that day on, he started avoiding Iris. The girl ran through the corridors and wanted to find him, but he was nowhere to be found. Looking for him all around, she had some strange sense of déjà vu. Had he taken offense at something? The girl went up to all the kids and asked if they had seen Theo, but the children answered that they hadn't seen it. Theo was nowhere to be found, and the girl was alarmed by that. She really wanted to find him, but all attempts were fruitless. Here she was sitting in the nurse's station with Haley's teacher. She was examining her ankle. The teacher asked if she was in pain. The girl said it only hurt a little, and there was a tingling sensation. Haley's teacher was looking at the girl intently. Iris lowered her eyes so she wouldn't have to look into Haley's eyes. Well, Haley's teacher bent over to be level with Iris's eyes. She said that her ankle was completely fine by now. But the girl shook her head and pulled her leg out. Her leg was still a little sore. The teacher asked, "If a girl is worried about something, she can tell her about it, or she can share it with her friends. She has lots of them." At the word friends, the image of only Theo came to the girl's mind. But he was nowhere to be found, and she was frustrated. The girl cried and said that friendship was useless. Haley's teacher was surprised. That's not something she's old enough to say. Iris asked Haley's teacher if she had any friends. The teacher laughed. What on earth did she think of her? Asked not to be misunderstood. She didn't mean that Haley's teacher has no friends at all. It's just that she started making conversation about friendship. That's when the girls got curious. The chemistry teacher thought for a moment. She said that the girl had changed a lot lately. She was nothing like the Iris the teacher had known before. Haley's teacher looked intently straight into the girl's eyes, and Iris wondered if she had noticed. The girl laughed and said that children grow up fast in their time. Iris tried to change the subject of the conversation. She offered the teacher a cup of tea. The teacher started from her chair. She asked her to wait a moment. In any case, today was the first time she had been so interested in her long years of life. The teacher asked her to tell what was bothering her so much that she was beginning to talk like an adult, and the girl confessed. Her friend is avoiding her. Haley's teacher was glad that her problem was not as serious as she thought it would be. The teacher and the girl began to drink tea. Iris said, Haley's teacher knows she's not the kind of kid who understands what their peers are thinking. And that's why she can't understand the reason he's so desperate to avoid her. Teacher or thought, if it's about that kid with the black hair and the weird eyes, he's not exactly a normal kid. And the teacher has already realized that. Iris said that the teacher was right, but that wasn't the problem at all. Usually in similar situations, the teacher would try to remember everything they did and talked about with the person, and then only then could the answer be found. The girl wondered, What were they talking to him about? Iris remembered they had said that when they grew up and left the orphanage, they would have to split up. The teacher laughed. She realized that was the reason why she was being avoided. Iris said it's inevitable, isn't it? They pack can't be together forever, not unless they get married. The teacher laughed. Iris seemed to have lit a fire in the heart of a 10-year-old boy. Also, Haley's teacher had just seen a head of black hair poking through the window, and she thought it was the head that had heard their whole conversation. Iris stirred. Iris ran out into the corridor, and there she did see Theo. He was walking quickly away. The girl asked him, "All this time you've been thinking about it, about how they could go on living together." Theo replied that he had been thinking. He said he didn't want to break up with her. Whatever happened? Iris reached over and grabbed Theo's arm. The boy turned around and looked the girl straight in the eye. Iris asked his friend not to be upset about it. After all, every meeting ends in a breakup, and if they stay, they will surely meet again one day. But the boy didn't want that. If they broke up, they would have to go through a lot of suffering to meet again. Theo thought about her words for a long time, so he decided to experience what it was like to be away from her. Iris guessed, so that's why he was avoiding her. The girl asked Theo not to worry. Even if they had to break up, she was sure it wouldn't be for long. Theo asked if she knew what was tormenting him. Iris replied, of course. Theo grabbed the girl's hands. Then she should know that he couldn't be away from her for a second. That's why they need to get married. Iris hadn't expected this turn of events. If they get married and start a family, then they can always be together. And Theo asked if she agreed. Iris said he doesn't fully understand. Marriage isn't that simple. People get married when they love each other. The boy was surprised. Then he loves her. Suddenly pulled her arms out. Theo realized that the girl was afraid of him. But that wasn't the point at all. Theo said if she wasn't afraid of him, then she should agree. And when they were adults, they could get married. Iris asked Theo to try to calm down a little. Theo was surprised. Did she really disagree? But why? Did she really hate him? The girl screamed that she hated him. Theo said it was the girl who literally lifted him off the earth. She was the first person to treat him like a human, not a demon. She always would be. They stood holding each other's hands. And if she ever left, he... And Theo didn't finish. Tears streamed from his eyes. Iris asked the boy not to cry. She wasn't going to leave. She promised to always be there for him. Theo once again questioned if it was true that she would always be there for him. Theo was overjoyed. He apologized for avoiding the girl all this time. But he's not the one who needs to apologize. If Iris makes Theo's anxiety disappear, will his obsession with her disappear? Suddenly, Theo gave the girl a quick hug. He asked me to forgive him. He wanted to hug like that for a while. Iris didn't mind. It was all right, they stood hugging each other. The fact that one day they would have to break up was very shocking to him. Suddenly, the headmistress said that prayer was now necessary. May the blessing of the goddess be upon her. The children stood with their hands folded and repeated what the headmistress said. A year went by and they were 15. Theo grew up, his hair got longer, and his face began to take on more and more masculine features. Iris watched him. Why had he grown so much? It wasn't surprising, though. Children grow up fast. Suddenly, the headmistress announced that today was a special day. The priests of the Temple of Hales had come to visit them. They will see them more often in the future, so you need to familiarize yourself with them. Iris wondered what that meant. She had never heard of such visits. One of the priests present was very good-looking. Iris thought, could this man really be a priest too? She thought priests were all old men. This one was surprisingly young and handsome. Theo asked the girl why she was looking at him like that. The girl laughed. She just stared at him like that. Theo turned his attention to this guy. Why is he staring at her so intently? Suddenly, the priest's eyes met Iris's. Iris stood like a possessed. Theo rubbed her shoulder, but she was looking straight at the priest. She couldn't see anything around her. She couldn't even hear Theo. All she saw in front of her was the priest. The priest said it was her, and the girl suddenly lost consciousness. Quickly, he picked her up in his arms. He tried to bring Iris to consciousness. He begged her to wake up. Suddenly, a dream came to the girl. Someone said that they had finally met. It was bright and full of colors all around. Iris couldn't believe her eyes. A goddess stood before her. How many times has this happened? And still she never gave up exactly as she did. And the goddess held out her hand to the girl. Iris could see the goddess's hand in her eyes. She said so Iris would eventually remember. At that moment, the girl opened her eyes. She was lying on the bed. I can't believe it was a dream, but it was so believable. At that moment, Halis's teacher peeked through the door. She was glad that the girl was finally awake. Asked what happened. The teacher said that the girl fell unconscious after the New Year's prayer and lay like that for a whole day. Then her friend brought her here. Suddenly, the girl paid attention. Next to her bed, Theo slept. The teacher said he kept sitting up waiting for her to wake up. He'd only just fallen asleep. The girl didn't remember why she had fallen. What happened? The teacher didn't know. She examined her but found nothing strange. The teacher thought it was stress, that the teacher helped her. The teacher said she'd better thank the kid sleeping next to her. It is not necessarily necessary to say that she is fine. Iris remembered. why that man was looking at her like that, and why she had fainted when their gazes met. She thought about it and stroked Theo's head. And what else does this strange dream mean? The girl felt as if she had forgotten something very important. At this time, Theo opened his eyes. He was glad the girl was awake. Theo jumped up and gave her a quick hug. It was very unexpected. Iris smiled and hugged him too. She asked the boy to look at her. His eyes were red and puffy. Could it be that he had been crying all this time? The girl wondered if he really cared that much about her. Theo turned away. He wasn't worried at all. Iris always loved it when he lied. He was so sweet in that moment. The young man wondered why she fainted. The girl didn't know. Haley's teacher said there was nothing wrong with her body. And also, the teacher said it could be due to fatigue or stress. Theo thought, I wish there was a way to go to a real hospital. Iris told him not to worry because she was fine. The girl asked Theo if he was tired. It was not comfortable to sleep here. She said that if he wanted to, he could lie down with her and pointed to her bed. Theo was surprised. At least she knows what she's talking about now. But the girl didn't understand. She didn't understand what was wrong. Theo looked carefully into her eyes. They are not little children anymore. Is Theo trying to say that they are adults? That's why he won't sleep with her. The teacher stood at the door and listened attentively. She quickly peeked through the doors and asked what they had going on. The girl said that if he didn't want to lie down with her, then say so, and there was no need to yell. Theo said she was saying all sorts of weird things. The teacher looked at the pair carefully. The girl said that if he didn't like, just let him keep sleeping in the chair. Otherwise, they'll just get kicked out of here for making noise. And the girl quickly covered his mouth with the palm of her hand. Iris asked him again if he was sure he would continue to sleep on the chair. It was still better for Theo than sleeping in the same bed with her. Iris quickly fell onto the bed and covered herself. You continued to sit on the edge of the bed. She apologized to Theo for making him worry. Theo said it was fine, no need to apologize. Theo leaned over the girl and told her to go back to sleep, asked her why her eyes weren't closed yet. The girl said it was simple. She thought he had changed a lot. Theo asked if the girl had forgotten that they were the same age. Theo asked if she had forgotten that they were the same age. Iris wondered on really who Theo is to her. She had never really thought about that question. Probably a feral cat. A young, sensitive cat whose wild nature has not yet completely faded. Theo was upset, so he was just an animal to her. Iris realized that Theo was angry because she had compared him to a cat. He quickly pulled away. Iris turned away and covered herself with the blanket. The girl thought Theo was a fool. And why was he like that? How difficult it is to understand the boy's thoughts. A few days later, Haley's teacher told Iris that she was fine, and she was free to go. Iris thanked Haley's teacher. Quickly, she grabbed Theo's hand and started to walk away. At this time, Theo withdrew the girl's hand. He asked not to take his hand. Theo said he wouldn't take her hand anymore. Iris was stunned. Would he not take her hand again? Why did he suddenly? The girl didn't understand why. You only said that because... Iris seemed to be fed up with rebellion. The boy asked again not to bullshit. Iris was crying, asking if he was doing this to her. Haley's teacher looked at them and smiled. She could see that they were fighting again. Theo answered again because... He said because she's not his sister. But Iris didn't know what he was talking about. It's better that way anyway. From that day on, Theo began to distance himself from her. It went on like that all winter. During a visit to the library, Iris was approached by her friend Evelyn. She asked the girl if she and Theo had had a fight. Evelyn told the girl that you've been kind of sad lately. It would just be strange that a boy who usually walked like a puppy around like that had become so distant from her. The girl jumped up and screamed that it wasn't like that. She asked me not to treat Theo like an animal anymore. At this time, everyone in the library turned their attention to Iris. The girl quickly sat back down in her seat. She said she hadn't done anything. It was just that he had suddenly pulled away from her for some reason. At that moment, the librarian looked out. She told the girl if she kept talking like that, she'd better leave at once. The girl slammed the book shut loudly. A little while later, she sat on the porch and thought, what on earth had happened between them? No matter how many times she asked him, he wouldn't answer. It wasn't like he was avoiding her completely. The girl clutched her hands to her head. She could go crazy like this. Not long ago, he cried and wanted to marry her. And now this. What's wrong with him? He's just trying to get her attention. Suddenly, the girl was heard. A man's voice asked what she was doing here. Standing next to her was Theo. Well, you said you took Theo said that if she was outside, she could easily catch cold. And the boy started to take off his scarf to keep Iris warm. Hung his scarf around the girl's neck. Iris was surprised by such an act. He was really very worried and concerned for her. Iris looked at the boy with surprised eyes. He didn't understand what she wanted to say with that look. Iris asked if he had forgotten what month it was. It was March. The girl didn't understand why he had given her his scarf. Theo didn't understand why Iris got so worked up. What had he done wrong again? Iris said it's because winter is over, and he's still carrying the balloon. Why does he do that? The boy looked at the girl in surprise. They stared into each other's eyes for a few seconds. At that moment, tears came out of Iris's eyes. And you surprised him. He asked her why she was crying. He gently wiped her tears away with his hand. But at that moment, the girl quickly pushed his hand away. She was upset, and he couldn't understand why she was crying. Theo surmised that maybe she was starting to cry for him now, and it was 100% true. He asked again if perhaps he had done something wrong. Iris said he did everything right. He's doing everything wrong. Since he'd pulled away from her. But it was all in her mind. She didn't voice it. The young man said that if she didn't want to say what he was guilty of, then he would try to guess. They stood in front of each other on the steps. You voiced to him the reason why she was crying so hard. The girl waited for his answer. She wondered if he would guess it or not. That reason was that he hadn't seen her for some time. Iris looked into his eyes in surprise and remained silent. Tears continued to fill her eyes and began to flow downward. Theo clapped his hands cheerfully. He realized from the look on her face that he had indeed guessed. The girl asked if he was doing it on purpose, but Theo again didn't know what she was talking about. He provokes her on purpose to see if she is sad without him. At that moment, Iris was crying. Theo said of course not. He didn't want the girl to be sad, and he gently fixed a strand of hair. The young man laughed. He cared. He was very worried about Iris. After all, he liked her a lot. After saying those words, Iris looked at Theo in surprise. Those words made Iris feel angry. He didn't think he could deceive her so easily. Then why is he only showing up now? Maybe he was trying to make new friends at the time, but Theo always stood his ground. He still thought she was enough for him. Iris demanded an explanation from Theo. Then why is he doing this? It's not fair to do that to her. The young man replied, he did it because she looks at him like a child. Constantly parched and a little cold, the guy and girl went back to the shelter. They came to the room where the mine burner was and walked over to it. Theo suggested that she sit by the fireplace to warm up. Iris was really cold outside. They sat down beside the fireplace on an armchair. A table separated them from each other. They sat and looked into each other's eyes. The body started the first conversation. He asked if she remembered when he said he wanted to be her family. The girl looked into his eyes in surprise. Of course she remembers that conversation. The family he was talking about wasn't just a brother or a dog. Theo wanted to be her spouse. It had to be real. Theo asked if she remembered the moment when she had compared him to a wild cat. Iris didn't really want to remember that incident. Of course she remembered it. Perhaps her thoughts that time didn't need to be voiced. Theo said that's when it hit him. To Iris, he was nothing more than a pet. A mute reply froze on the girl's lips. She seemed to want to say something, but she kept silent. Theo continued his conversation. Then he began to think about how he could become someone she would see as a man who could be her husband. Iris replied excitedly. She knew how Theo felt. She thought he was thinking too much about the future, and it was necessary to live in the here and now. No one knows what will happen in the future. Is it not normal to think about such things? Or maybe Iris just doesn't want to take the young man seriously. The boy and the girl sat staring into each other's eyes. It wasn't like that at all. It was just that a wedding was somehow... And the girl didn't finish. Theo interrupted her. He wants to be with her even after they leave the orphanage forever, and the only way to be together forever is marriage. Even though they were the same age, they thought very differently. Iris only shrieked. Although Theo was a little happy to see the way the girl was crying because of him. Iris screamed that it wasn't true. Either way, she was glad he wasn't avoiding her anymore, and it was all thanks to her crying. Iris started to protest. She didn't cry at all. At that moment, Theo grinned and fell silent. She almost caught him. He must win Iris's heart gradually. Oh, she didn't suspect a thing. The young man put his hand to his mouth and hesitated. The girl saw it. I asked him what he was thinking about. Theo didn't want to give away the real reason for his thoughts. It was nothing. One day, Iris was watering the flower bed outside the orphanage. She was very fond of flowers, so her favorite thing to do was to look after flowers. At that moment, the girl heard behind her. She was sure Jessie had come to water the flowers too, but the one who came up behind her was silent, and Iris turned round quickly. How surprised she was to see this man. She didn't even expect a priest to be standing behind her. The same priest who had made her faint when she looked into his eyes. The young man said, looking at the way she tended the flowers, he thought she was very kind. The young man laughed and said hello to the girl. He hadn't had time to introduce himself last time. Now she said her name. His name is Frey. The boy had orange hair. Iris looked at him in surprise. The young man stood and smiled. Looking at the young man, the girl remembered. It was he, the priest whose eyes she had fainted when she looked at him. The thought never left her mind. She had a hunch. She was even 100% sure that he had not come here by chance. Iris shouted out very loudly, "Why did he come here?" The girl also called him Mr. Such a title amused the young man very much. He grabbed his head and began to laugh. Such a strange address. Mr. This behavior made Iris a little angry. The girl quickly picked up the watering can. She said, if he didn't answer her right now, she wouldn't vouch for where that watering can would fly now. The young man was very stunned, for the girl was very clever. But he had expected that. In fact, he only came to chat with her because he really wanted to get close to her. And also, although it's a secret, at the end of the year, the priests assigned to this orphanage are subject to student evaluations. Naturally, it's not done out in the open, and just casually ask a few questions about her. Was that really why he had come to her in the first place? The young man replied that he might as well, and now if he was honest with her, she should help him. Iris hesitated. She didn't even know if she could help him now. After all, she had a lot of things to do in the flower garden. The priest suddenly put his hand on the girl's head. He said she was so charming, and he thought he could get along with her. Iris was surprised. He talks like he's known her for a long time, and by the way, wasn't he the one she crossed paths with on New Year's Eve? The young man tried to answer the girl's questions one by one. Regarding the first question, he had learnt about her from the headmistress of the orphanage even before he was sent to the orphanage. After that, he met her eyes. But he had not at all supposed that the girl would faint so suddenly. The young man asked Iris if she was in pain or anything. The girl said she was fine. It was unlikely that she could have passed out from a mere glance. Frey wasn't surprised that she didn't trust him. Later, he was wrong to think she was just like the other kids. But there was something different about her that made her stand out from the rest. During the conversation, I watched the time carefully. He had a very strange expression on his face. Why was he looking at her with some interest? Is this his way of trying to appear friendly? Or maybe she's wrong. Iris was very rarely wrong. Frey asked the girl what she was thinking about, but Iris didn't want to give away all her thoughts. She just brushed it off and said it was nothing. The girl said it was nice to meet you. Unfortunately, she has to go. Frey understood everything. He asked if he could say hello to her the next time they met. The girl said, of course, turned around and started to walk away. He was definitely hiding something. She didn't know what, but she wanted to find out. At that time, she opened the door to the library. They had arranged to meet Theo, and he was long gone. Iris felt guilty, so she apologized for her long absence. Theo sat at the table, leaning on his arm. He didn't turn to Iris. I wondered if he was so upset that she was late. Theo said that it was completely different. The girl asked why his face was like that. It was also strange how coldly he answered her. Iris asked if something was wrong. Had she done something wrong? But Theo replied that he didn't. At that moment, Theo sat looking outside the window. Iris guessed there must be something wrong outside the window. Theo protested. He didn't want her to look out there. But Iris quickly ran to the window and looked out there. What was he hiding there? At that moment, the girl realized. She was looking out the window with surprised eyes, and Theo was staring with a hateful look. Outside the window stood Priest Frey. That window overlooked the flower field. Frey still hadn't left this place. Iris guessed. He had probably seen her talking to her. Theo told her not to look out the window, but she didn't listen. The girl sat down opposite the young man and said there was nothing wrong with that. Anyway, she asked Theo how his training was, and opened the textbook loudly. Theo was in thought. Asked Iris if they could really solve this test. The young man seemed to doubt it. Iris asked why not. After all, no one can forbid orphans to take the exam. Even if they fail this test, this knowledge will be useful in the future. And if they can pass this test, they will be successful in the academy. The body wondered. What happens if only one of them passes? One gets into the academy and one doesn't. And then they would definitely break up. Iris didn't understand why he kept asking that. The young man kept asking about it because it was very important to him. Carries looked at Theo with a stern look and asked him, so what? You got it. If Iris were to pass the test, she would definitely prefer to leave here. The girl didn't understand why he was talking about her like that, if it was to make her look bad. Theo understood everything. He decided to ask in a different way. Would she choose to separate herself from the others for a while for the sake of the future? Iris glared at the boy with anger. She didn't like it when he said that. They weren't children anymore, they were adults. Theo confirmed that he was an adult, but she was still a baby. The girl offered to end this conversation and go back to her studies. Theo was sure that if she tried hard enough, she could be accepted to any academy. Theo learnt another thing that he would be very sad about, if it ever happened, but he also knew that he had the strength to deal with it. The young man looking at the girl asked, if it does happen, what she would do. He wanted to know the answer to that question, but the girl only stared silently into his eyes. Theo asked if she would leave him. Iris didn't understand why he said that. The young man demanded a straight answer. If that happened, would she leave him? The girl looked intently into his eyes and remained silent. I wonder if Iris is going to leave him. At that moment, the girl jumped up and slapped her hands on the book. She shouted that she couldn't concentrate. She had to postpone her studies for later. After all, it was impossible to memorize new knowledge in such conditions. The events took place in the orphanage library. Iris stood on and pulled out the textbook she needed, and who approached her from behind and asked her a question. If she likes to study stories. Iris looked round in surprise. Standing behind her was Priest Frey. He weighed her with a wave of his hand. Iris replied that she didn't really like history, but she needed to study to get into the academy. The girl told him that she was going to write the academy entrance exam next spring. Frey was surprised. That was amazing. He asked if there was anything he could do to help the girl. Iris asked if he had ever studied for exams. The young man wasn't sure if it applied to the academy, but he knew something. The girl looked at the young man with pleading eyes. Could he really help her? The young man smiled cheerfully and said of course. They sat down at a table and began studying. Freud said it might come up on the exam, and it's better to memorize this information too. After the failed negotiations between the third emperor and the minister, political power was separated from religion. You just have to remember that it relates to the history of the empire. The girl had no idea that the Fae would turn out to be such a great teacher. The girl was delighted. It was amazing. Thanks to him, she understood everything perfectly. Frey asked if she knew the legend of the founding of the empire. Iris said, of course. Shelter Haley pretty much knew it. Frey asked if she minded if he told her a lesser-known story. The girl didn't understand what lesser-known meant. Frey confirmed that it was indeed a lesser-known story. He really wanted her to hear it. Iris looked the priest of the fairy straight in the eyes in surprise. She didn't think there was anything in history she didn't know. And Frey began his story. This story is about a goddess. Her name was Lily. The story went that one day she came down from heaven to take care of the people who lived as slaves to demons. She had special powers. One of them was the ability to cleanse evil and heal all wounds. Iris listened to Frey's story with fascination. Lilia, who had golden hair and eyes as blue as the sky, had a knack for healing human wounds. The goddess who used her power to save humanity began to feel affection for the people who followed her. And to protect humanity from the demons that constantly threatened their lives, the goddess was reborn in a human body. The girl guessed, is that why there is a man in the temple with the same name as the goddess? Iris said she had heard the story before, but it was still interesting. Frey asked if she wanted to know something else more interesting. Those words interested the girl. Could he really tell her something more interesting? The story also said that on the day of the birth of the goddess, the demon is also born. The goddess and the demon are constantly meeting each other, as if they were guided to each other by fate itself. That's why they are so close. Iris was horrified at the priest's words. Did Frey think Theo was a demon too? The priest asked how she felt about his story. He asked her if the legend had made her interested in the story. The girl only answered vaguely. It's just a simple conversation, she thought. And she lowered her head. At this moment, Theo and Iris were already sitting in the library. Theo was trying to read the information in the textbooks, while Iris seemed to be flying in the clouds. She kept remembering the image of Frey. His image clouded her at once. Theo noticed that something was wrong with her, and the young man asked the girl, "All I'm fine with her." Iris didn't even hear the words Theo said. He said if she wasn't feeling well, maybe she should take a break from studying. Well, the girl objected. She was just thinking. The young man asked what was bothering her. The girl exhaled a sigh of relief. She said that she had been having strange dreams lately, and Iris told Theo one of the episodes of her dream. She hears someone's voice in the dream, but she can't understand what the voice wants to say to her. That's exactly what happened. Theo smiled. It sounded like a revelation. The way she described her dreams was very much like sacred revelations. Theo's words made Iris angry. He was scaring her even more with those words. Could it be a revelation from God? Does it mean that she has grown a little? The girl didn't want to continue this conversation. Theo understood that and asked her not to get angry. Besides, God doesn't exist, does he? Did the young man think they were just meaningless dreams? Maybe he did think that. Iris shifted her gaze to the book Frey had recommended. The girl thought about it. He might be a bit of an unpleasant person, but his abilities as a teacher are very good. And the girl turned to the young man again. At that moment, he was writing something in a notebook. Doesn't he think they could use a teacher? And Iris looked at the young man happily. Theo didn't understand what she meant. He took his eyes off the textbook and looked at the girl carefully. The girl just thought it would be a good idea. Theo said, she knows how much he hates adults. All the more reason he wouldn't want them around, even in case there was anything they could do to help them. He wanted to study for the exams, just the two of them with Iris. The girl didn't want to argue with the young man. Her face was embittered. Maybe she should just get over it. And the girl bit her lip. Theo asked Iris not to bite her lips anymore, and he ran his finger gently over her lips. The young man also asked to stop trying to please him. Iris asked that if he is not happy with something and doesn't like it, it can just be said. Iris just wanted them to learn from an adult. If it's just the two of them, they'll quickly reach their limit. But if they asked someone, Theo wondered who they might ask. And the girl said she knew he knows that priests often come to their orphanage nowadays. And if... The girl didn't finish. Theo quickly interrupted her with the word, "No." The girl gasped. She didn't understand why he was so reluctant to help. The girl tried to convince the young man that this would be a great opportunity for them. If they took advantage of it properly, their chances of getting into the academy would increase. Iris said there was this priest, Frey. He helped her with history once and it was amazing. He's very good at explaining things. And if he taught them, they would definitely be able to pass the entrance exam. The words about Freya made the boy very angry, so much so that he just broke the pen in his hands. Iris didn't expect such behavior from her friend. His eyes were angry and full of hatred. The girl realized that he didn't like it. The girl asked if the young man was angry, and he demanded that she continue. But it seemed to her that he didn't want her to continue. But it would be worth a try. So she suggested asking the priest to teach them. She thought he wouldn't refuse help. Suddenly, Theo jumped up from his chair and slapped his hands on the table. His eyes seemed to be burning red. The girl didn't understand what was happening to him at that moment. He quickly turned away and strode away. Iris only gave him a surprised look. The young man was moving faster and faster away from the table. Everything indicated that he was in a bad mood. Ever since she asked Mr. Freya to tutor her, Theo had started avoiding her again. The girl wandered the corridors hoping to find her mate. And one day, walking down the corridor, she saw Theo passing by. The girl asked him to wait. She caught up and touched her finger to it. The girl asked if he was still angry with her, but the young man was silent and would not answer her. He just walked slowly away. He didn't like it so much that she asked someone to give her private lessons. The events took place in the dining room. There was food on a tray in front of the girl. The food was a portioned salad, a sausage, an egg, and 2 croissants. Iris poked one of the croissants on her fork. She asked for a taste of the croissant and held it out to Theo. The young man knew how much she loved croissants, but for his sake, she was willing to share it. The young man looked surprised and looked her straight in the eye, but it didn't work and Theo turned away. Iris realized that she was being haunted by failure again. The girl wasn't upset. If he refused her croissant, she could eat it herself. No need to share it with anyone. The girl was sitting near a flower bed and plucked a daisy. At that moment, a little further away from her, Theo walked by. The girl saw the young man and held out a flower to him. She said that she wanted to give it to him. Theo looked at the flower in surprise, then looked at the girl and silently walked away. While Iris didn't give up trying to win Theo's heart, she asked one of her friends to give Theo a gift from her. The girl handed the young man a box wrapped with a bow and a card, a coupon for a wish. The young man took the gift and gently clasped it in his hand. Iris was looking out of the wall at this moment. She realized that of course he liked her gift. But this moment Theo clutched the box in his hand ruthlessly. He didn't even look at the contents. Iris smacked herself on the head with the palm of her hand. All attempts were unsuccessful. It didn't seem like it was going to be that easy. But she had already tamed Theo once before, and now she was going to have to do the same. The events took place the next morning. Theo was walking down the corridor of the orphanage. Suddenly, Iris appeared from behind the door. He shuddered. He hadn't expected to see her here. The girl quickly pinned him with her hands against the wall. Iris didn't realize what she was doing. She looked intently into his eyes. Their eyes were very close. At this point, the young man turned away. He said that if she had nothing to say, it was worth letting him go. But the girl kept repeating his name. The young man didn't understand what else she wanted from him. She was angry and repeated that she was sorry. She still didn't realize what she had done wrong again. But the girl apologized if she had offended the young man, and she offered to make it up to him. At that moment, she fell on her knees and begged the boy. Iris said that she couldn't eat or study properly because of their quarrel, and she was sad because she didn't see him. The girl asked if he understood her or not. The young man covered his eyes with his hand. Iris was surprised, for Theo began to cry. Did he really cry after her words? Is he really so angry that he's even crying? That really surprised Iris. She didn't expect him to do that. She asked him if he was laughing at her. She called Theo a villain for the first time and asked him not to be bullied. The young man apologized to the girl. He asked if she was all right, but the girl was very angry. She asked if he knew how much she had suffered because of him. He really apologized and was sorry. The way Iris was angry amused Theo. She was so ridiculously angry that he couldn't stop laughing. I wonder if he's telling her that on purpose. Did he really mean it that way to play a joke on her? Theo replied because she knew how much he liked being with her, and he took the girl's hands in his own. But he couldn't, because he was so pleased to see how sweetly she was trying. The girl got even more angry. Did it really look cute? Yes, it was very sweet for a young man. He hoped that now that he had been so frank with her, she would forgive him. Iris had agreed to forgive Theo. Well, if he did it again, she'd be very offended. Theo promised he wouldn't do it again. Even though they'd made up, they'd never talked about private lessons. But if he wanted it so badly, she could learn it all herself. And then she could teach Theo herself. Iris ran happily through the garden. Suddenly, she saw the priest Frey standing not far from her. The girl was surprised and stopped. She greeted Mr. Frey. Frey looked at her with a condescending look. He only sighed in response. The girl ran up to the priest and said, about what they had talked about last time, she would be glad if he could teach her. Frey interjected in surprise, wondering if she was talking about teaching. The girl asked only to be told when it would be convenient for the priest to give the lessons. She assumed that 2 or 3 lessons a week would be enough. The priest asked her which subjects she wanted to tighten up so that he could prepare. It was obvious how much the priest wanted, and tried to help her. The girl did not ignore this. Or he's so obsessed with the goddess that he wants to help anyone who looks like her. It's not like he has some ulterior motive. Iris has been thinking. Frey saw this and asked if something was wrong, but the girl said it wasn't at all what he thought it was. She thanked him for his help. Frey smiled. It was all right after all he had offered to help her. Iris wondered if she could trust him. Iris said thanking him very much anyway. She decided that she would just watch him for now. A few days later, the first day of Frey's training was approaching. She was walking down the corridor, carrying a stack of books in front of her. Suddenly, a boy jumped out and almost hit her. The girl shouted that she had to be careful. When they were studying, they used the quiet room for recreation. But for Mr. Frey's classes, they decided to use a room in the main building, and it was noisy. The priest's purpose is still not clear to her, so the girl needs to be as careful as possible with him. Suddenly, the girl was surprised by something. She saw Frey standing across from Theo. They glared at each other. The books quickly fell from the girl's hands to the floor. She didn't expect Frey to be with Theo. Why they're together? They stood opposite each other and stared intently into each other's eyes. Frey was a head taller than Theo. Iris stood not far from them and watched what was happening. At that moment, the girl coughed loudly to draw attention to herself. The boys quickly noticed her and turned their heads. Iris quickly jumped up to Frey. She introduced Frey's priest, who had agreed to train her. Afterwards, she introduced Theo as her friend. Frey said that he was very pleased to meet Theo. And they looked fiercely into each other's eyes again. What was that atmosphere in the room? Thinking a little with the girl said that her friend didn't really like the idea of private lessons, so she decided to take them alone. Theo wondered if that was what he was talking about. Iris confirmed in raised tones that he had said that. The young man said he didn't remember it at all. He said he wanted to study with a priest too. Iris was surprised. Why did Theo suddenly decide to join? Iris only glanced at the pride-limbed friend. Is this really coming from someone who was originally against these lessons? Now the girl turned to the priest. She told him if it was all right with him if her friend could join them. After all, he was also going to take the entrance exam with her. The priest was surprised. He thought it would be a little difficult. After all, it was already up to him. Round 2 had begun. They began to look into each other's eyes again. And did this grown man, a priest, behave like a child? Iris smacked herself on the head, and she remembered Frey telling her he was only 18. Theo asked the girl why she would even want to learn from someone like that. Iris asked her to believe her. He is like that only in the beginning. Iris apologized for her friend's disrespectful behavior, and she once again asked the priest to think it over. Despite the boy's impertinence, he is a very diligent and studious student. The priest said since she was asking for it. Iris said to the priest, "Thank you very much." For this one, she turned to Theo, told him everything was fine. The girl was happy. Theo told her not to even think about being alone with him. The girl only smiled cheerfully. The priest said it's time for their lesson to begin. They sat in the bright room and the notebook. The priest said that they were already familiar with the history of the empire. Iris looked into his eyes and wondered if he had been a professor in a previous life. He was good at explaining things after all. This was even better though, and the girl tried to dip her pen into the ink. The pen stayed dry. Apparently it had run out of ink. The girl didn't know what to do now. The priest immediately saw Iris's problem. He saw that she had run out of ink, so he asked her to go and get some new ink. The girl quickly agreed and wanted to get up. But at that moment, Theo, sitting next to her, grabbed her hand. He offered her the use of his ink, and the girl brushed it off. After all, everything was fine and she had no trouble going out to get new ones. She said she'd be back soon and wished them a little chat. Theo asked angrily if she was doing it on purpose. Iris jumped up and ran to the door. She said she wouldn't be back soon. The girl was sure if they chatted with each other for a while, they would become friends. There was a silent pause in the room. The young men looked at each other and were silent. Theo noticed that as soon as Iris was out the door, the priest's strained smile disappeared in an instant. It was worth being very careful with him. The two of them were an odd combination. Theo thought they were at least a little different because of being a priest. He ends up being just as unpredictable. The priest repeated his question. Predictable. And does the body know why it is so? Because he saw the relationship between the two of them very clearly. Iris said he was no different from anyone else, and tried her best to convince others of that. And it was all done for something like a body. The priest asked if it would change his nature. Theo's eyes glowed with red fire. He thought all priests did was waste time on a god who didn't even exist. But he saw how Theo was despised for just being. And there was no changing that. It was just the boy's fate. Suddenly, Theo slammed his fist on the table. He wondered who this priest thought he was. After all, he had never believed in such things as gods or demons. The priest smilingly asked Theo if he wanted to know why he was getting close to Iris. Until Frey's lips confirmed the existence of the goddess. Iris had already returned with a can of ink at that moment. She didn't understand why the room was so quiet. All came to the table and asked. They hadn't been fighting while she was gone, had they? The young men sat silent. The priest said of course not. They simply had nothing to talk about. Iris was surprised. She had left them to talk and bond, but it seemed to be getting worse. A few days later, events were taking place at the orphanage. Iris continued to attend the priest's lessons. After the first class, Theo never showed up again. He only said he had some business of his own to attend to and his lessons to learn. Iris had the feeling that her friend just didn't want to learn. Suddenly, the girl turned to Mr. Frey. He was ready to listen to her. I wonder if something's bothering her. Iris said she was sorry. It wasn't clear what she was sorry for. In fact, she was very picky about people. So from their first meeting, she did not trust the priest very much. It's just that usually no one helps others for nothing. The girl said she thought she had. At that moment, the priest laughed loudly at his account. She was wrong, and the girl apologized once more. She lowered her head low and low. The priest laughed loudly. The girl was surprised that he was laughing at her. The girl had not expected this. The priest laughed. She didn't seem to be used to hating anyone. Iris was indignant. Did the priest really want her to continue to suspect him? Honestly, Frey had his own reasons for helping her. It was just that he wanted to get closer to her. Plus, because he and her were so similar in hair and eye color, he thought of her as a sister. Iris was stunned by such words. The priest asked her to forgive her. After all, his words sounded strange. To tell the truth, he had no brothers or sisters. Then Iris didn't mind either, and she called the priest brother. The girl became happy. The priest did not expect such a turn of events. He was surprised at the girl's quick change of mood. Iris laughed. He'd said they looked alike, hadn't he? That was right, that's exactly what the priest had said. They had the same color hair and eyelashes, and they both had blue eyes. Then there's nothing wrong with that. The priest was thinking about something. He put his hand to his chin and thought about something. Suddenly, the girl turned away and walked away. She didn't insist. The priest waved his hands. He didn't mind either. Iris didn't ask to be adopted. She simply allowed the priest to treat her as his own sister. Frey was pleased and smiled. He didn't mind at all. The next day, the events took place at the orphanage. Iris was walking down the corridor carrying a stack of books. Suddenly, she saw her friend Theo in front of her. The boy was walking with his back to her. Suddenly, he turned round. It was obvious that he was angry. Iris asked what was wrong with him. I wondered if something had happened. The young man asked, "There are no demons in the world, right? Or not?" The girl wondered why he'd started talking so suddenly. Theo demanded of her simply to answer. "Goddesses and demons are all nonsense, right? They're fairy tales made up for children." Iris agreed. No one had ever seen them, so it was hard to be sure of their existence. Theo was surprised. She always said what he wanted to hear. Iris wondered if the boy really cared that much. Did he really care about the existence of goddesses and demons? The boy seemed to be confused again. If he thinks he's a demon again, then the girl has already told him that he is him and no one else. I wonder if someone was provoking him on purpose. Iris said to tell him who was doing it and he'd be finished. Theo turned away. He said he wasn't a child anymore. Iris tried to figure out who was provoking him, but the boy evaded the answer. He said that no one was provoking him. He told the girl it was okay and turned round abruptly. Theo walked away. Iris stood there wondering what was bothering him so much. Suddenly, she walked up to her friend and asked him what he was reading. He doesn't attend Frey's classes at all, after all. As soon as Theo heard his name, his face changed. He quickly slammed the book shut and said he hated the guy. Iris didn't ask him how he felt about it at all. She just asked him what he was reading, nothing more. The girl said if he didn't want to, he didn't have to go to class, but she asked him to please not hate the priest too much. Theo asked why. Was it just because he was her teacher? Iris said he was wrong. She asked him not to hate the priest because it only hindered Theo. It's an emotional burden to hate someone. That's why she didn't want Theo to hate anyone. Theo said that he would try, but he wouldn't promise anything, and he turned away again and stared into the book. The girl thought that soon her friend would come to terms with it and they could all study together. Suddenly, Iris saw her friend Evelyn sitting nearby. The girl came closer to her. Evelyn was very happy that her friend had come. She hugged her hand gently and was happy. Evelyn asked Iris to tell her honestly what her relationship was with the priest. The girl had just incredible interest in her eyes. Iris wondered, what does she mean by that? And she looked into her friend's eyes. Evelyn meant the handsome guy with the blonde hair and the shining eyes. The girl wondered what they had in common. Her friend asked her to tell Iris everything, but the girl didn't know what she meant. She said that they had nothing to do with each other, but Evelyn didn't believe it. Could Iris really be telling the truth? I wonder if she's not lying now. They were friends, and Evelyn could tell Iris said she wasn't lying. It was strange because Evelyn thought they were related. Iris was indignant. It wasn't even logically possible for her to suddenly have a brother. The girl sighed. Evelyn asked her to take a look for herself, for he was waiting for her again. Evelyn pointed her finger in the direction. Iris wondered if he was really waiting for her. The priest sat beside the flowers and gently stroked them. Evelyn had once told him that Iris sometimes took care of the flowers in the garden. Since then, he had not been able to keep his hands off them. Iris looked carefully out the window, but this simply couldn't be. The girl was sure it was just a simple, strange coincidence. Evelyn said she had a suggestion. She thought Priest Frey had come to their orphanage to take Iris away, because she's his little sister, lost once as a child. Iris was stunned by her friend's conclusion, and asked her to think for herself. Otherwise, why would he be looking for her every time? Iris asked Evelina. She didn't happen to be thinking about a writing career. After all, they were now not in a novel, but in real life. And Priest Frey had never even furtively mentioned her sister or anything like that. Iris was surprised, and she remembered the episode when he'd mumbled about his sister. She grabbed her head with her hands. She started screaming and getting angry. Evelyn realized from the girl's reaction that she was right, and her friend quickly clapped her hands together. At that moment, someone called out to the girls. The librarian stood in front of them. Iris bent her head and said she was sorry. Evelyn said that they would not talk anymore but would be silent. But the girls needed to leave the library. Evelyn suggested asking him herself. Iris didn't share that thought. Suddenly, her friend grabbed Iris by the arm and dragged her somewhere. The girl asked Evelyn to wait. She didn't want to wait for anything and quickly ran through the shelter. Here they had already jumped out into the street, and Evelyn called out to the priest. Iris was stunned. She said that you can't ask about it so bluntly. Evelyn said she wasn't completely stupid, and asked her friend to confide in her. Evelyn said she would try to behave calmly. Suddenly, the priest looked round and saw the girls. He greeted them affectionately and asked them what they wanted. Evelyn said they needed to ask him something important. Iris said it was nothing special they wanted to ask. The priest looked at the girls and asked if they wanted to ask him something important, said that was correct, and asked the priest to answer only honestly. Iris body Mr. Frayne to ignore her friend. The priest said it was okay. Evelina was told by the priest that she could ask him anything she wanted. Evelina said well. The priest looked intently into Iris's eyes. At that moment, Evelyn bent down and asked the priest a question. What was the reason he had come to their orphanage? Was the reason really to find someone? The priest looked carefully into the girl's eyes. His face became surprised. There was a silent pause. The young man didn't know what to say to the girl at first. Iris was surprised. Why reacting? The priest quickly turned his back further to the flowers. He said, "That's right." Evelyn jumped up and down with happiness. It turned out that everything had been confirmed, and she was right, as always. But Iris protested. This can't be true. The priest looked at Iris carefully. He said that he had been desperately looking for someone for a long time. Is it possible that the one he is looking for is Iris? And the friend pointed a finger at the girl. At that moment, Iris said that it was already time for them to leave. She quickly covered her mouth with her hand. The girl decided that that was enough. She asked Mr. Frey to forgive them for wasting his time, and it was time for them to leave. She wanted to perhaps say something, but the girl held her mouth forcibly. Evelina struggled and begged to be let go. They hadn't learnt everything yet. Iris said they didn't need to find out anything more and they had to leave. They quickly rounded the corner of the building. Iris leaned on her knees. Evelyn was still not calming down. She told her friend that she'd said as much. But the priest hasn't confirmed anything yet, so it might not be true at all. Evelyn asked Iris not to be a fool. A toddler could figure it out. Evelyn couldn't even believe it. She quickly grabbed her hands. There was no way she could believe she had a brother. It was very touching. Every kid who was in the orphanage always wanted to find one of their relatives, whether it was a parent or just a sibling. But it's a soulmate. It was a horror. No one but Evelyn can know about this. If you find out about it, Frey is Iris's brother. He would never accept it. Something has to be done. The only question is what? And Iris wondered. She turned to her friend, took her hands in hers and looked into her eyes. She told Evelyn that this had to stay between the two of them. Evelyn said that the girl might mean that this mystery must remain between the three of them. After all, Priest Frey knew it too. It was certain. Anyway, her friend kept it a secret. She asked her not to tell anyone about it. The girl was upset. Evelyn wanted so badly to tell Haley and Jess. Iris was sure if she hadn't asked her, she would have told everyone she knew. Evelyn agreed. She didn't want things to go downhill because of this anyway. Iris thanked her friend for understanding. Iris asked Evelyn if she would keep her promise, and the girls clasped their hands together with their little fingers. Evelyn said she would. Iris and Theo were in class again. Priest Frey was giving the lesson. Once again, Iris sat staring at her teacher like a mesmerized woman. Theo always noticed when his friend was flying in the clouds. Frey said, "Make sure you memorize this part, it will be on the exam. And you also need to memorize this one as well." Suddenly, the girl hacked out of the blue. The priest and her friend looked at her in surprise, seeing that everyone was paying attention to her. She looked first at her friend, then at the priest. After that, the girl raised her hands and apologized. After all, she thought for a second. The priest said there was nothing wrong with it, and he looked carefully into her eyes. The girl was mesmerized by his gaze, and she looked at him carefully and thought, had Frey always been like this? She looked at this young man with loving eyes. At that moment, a friend sitting next to me asked, what was she thinking about? Theo said over, earth to earth, and party in front of her face a bottle of liquid. Iris screamed. She said it was nothing special, but Theo didn't think it was nothing special. Asked why she was lying to him. The girl said she wasn't going to lie to him. She said she was being honest. Iris wondered if her words looked like lies. Was it really so obvious? Iris smiled and said it was just something to think about. Theo moved closer to her. He was starting to get angry. What was she thinking that she couldn't tell him? But the girl wouldn't admit it. If she told Theo that Frey might be her brother, it might make him very angry. And if she leaves the orphanage because of it, Theo could do something irreversible at once. And the girl remembered what was written in the novel. No, that can't be allowed to happen. Iris quickly jumped off the chair. She said that she had to leave now. She apologized for not finishing the lesson. The girl quickly got up from her desk and ran out of the office. She didn't understand why life was so difficult. She was walking down the corridor. Many students said hello to her. They were wondering if she would go to the library today. I was surprised. It was all very strange. She had a lot of friends. There was no one to share her concerns with. Suddenly the girl walked to the window. Maybe now she should find Haley's teacher. She was the only one who had always understood and supported her. She pretty much knew everything ahead of time. Iris walked up to the point and looked inside. She asked if Haley's teacher was here. What was her surprise when she saw Priest Frey in Haley's teacher's office? He cheerfully called the girl by name and smiled. Iris didn't expect to see him here at all. Why he's here? Is he watching her? The priest said he can see exactly what she's thinking. So he's not watching her, and you shouldn't think that. The priest said he was just here to join Haley for tea. Haley's teacher sat at the table and just said it was just as he said it was. He'd just come in for tea. Iris said she's fine, and she knows the priest wouldn't have followed her. But to be honest, it wasn't like that. Suddenly, Haley's teacher got up from the table. She thought the two of them had a lot to talk about, and she didn't really want to get involved. So she asked the priest and Iris to head for the exit. The teacher just chased them away. As the priest and the girl walked out, the door closed loudly behind them. They looked at each other. The priest asked if Iris could help him. The girl wondered what kind of help the priest needed from her. He said he wanted to give a gift to someone, but he didn't really know what kids liked. Iris was surprised. She had nothing to do with it. Priest Frey smiled and held out his hand to the girl. He asked her advice because she was the closest person to him here.